All right, welcome back everybody. If this is your first time on the channel, welcome to Notes to Fret, where we are all about turning theory into riffs. And in this video, we are going to conclude our conversation on the Lydian mode. This is Supplemental Part 3. If anyone's here and you haven't seen the previous videos on Lydian, or you need a refresher on scales, please go take a look back at some of the other videos, because we will be referencing that in this video. And I know these videos can be a little bit long, so I want to make certain that everybody's getting the most out of their time. But with that being said, let's just go ahead and jump right in. Here at the top, we're looking at our C Ionian, or C major. And at the bottom, we're looking at our C Lydian, right? And when we looked at these two modes, because of the half step between the third and the fourth at the top, and the whole step between the third and the fourth at the bottom, therefore, we have that raised fifth, which was our F sharp. Now, what I want to do is just take a real quick look at comparing C Lydian down at the bottom to G major up at the top. Now, G major has an F sharp in it. We know it's F sharp diminished. We'll talk about that in a second. And then C Lydian has that raised fourth, so it also has an F sharp. Now we know that, we looked at it in our last video, we know that the fourth is diminished in Lydian, and we know that the seventh is diminished in Ionian. Therefore, G major has an F sharp diminished because it's the seventh chord, and C Lydian has an F sharp diminished because it's in the fourth position, right? So, as we're looking at this, one of the things that I was talking about in the original video of Lydian is you need to be careful as you're progressing through a mode, in this case C Lydian, and you need to avoid making it sound like G major or G Ionian. Now, as we're looking at this, we know that the seventh and the fourth are really the same chords, but we talked about, kind of diminished or a little bit off limits, just because there's some voodoo that kind of goes into using diminished chords. And even when you use them properly, they're not used very frequently, right? So don't think, oh wow, if I become a master of always throwing in a diminished chord, that will be something special. Yeah, even people that know how to use them very, very well, like I said, diminished chords are very seldomly used. 2 to 3% of music kind of has them involved in there. So just don't get that misconception that, because they're not used very frequently, therefore if you use them more often, your music will it will definitely stand out to be different. I wouldn't say it's going to stand out to be great, but just keep that in mind. And what I want to do is I want to clean up this visual just a little bit, and I want to introduce everyone to another concept that you'll see very frequently when you see music written down. Above each letter, I have the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? And that's just the degree in the scale. But typically, what you'll see them numbered as is using Roman numerals. Uppercase means a major chord, and a lowercase means a minor chord. And when you see a diminished, you're going to see it lowercase as well, because if you recall, a diminished chord still has a minor third in it, right? So technically, it's kind of minor-ish because of that third. So just keep that in mind. But here, it gives us a much cleaner visual to look at, and we can very quickly determine our majors and our minors with the different numbering. So I'm going to do that down at the bottom for C Lydian as well. Now, as we're looking at this, we know that our fourth and our seventh, we got that to be a diminished chord, right? So G major is going to have a seventh diminished, which kind of means the seventh degree is a little off limits to us. And C Lydian is going to have a fourth as a diminished, meaning that fourth degree is a little bit off limits to us, right? Now, additionally, if we look at G Ionian and C Lydian, we can see that they both have a G major. Additionally, they both have a C major. They both have a D major. Again, they both have A minor. They both have B minor. We spoke about that in the last video. They both have an E minor. And then obviously they both have the F sharp diminished. So really, when we look at the difference between C Ionian and C Lydian, right, down at the bottom, the difference is between C Ionian, it had a D minor. C Lydian has a D major. And also C Ionian or C major had a B diminished, but in C Lydian, it has a B minor, right? This is what we looked at in the last one. And then they both have the F sharp diminished, right? So C Lydian has the fourth as the diminished, and then obviously C Ionian would have the seventh as diminished, right? Now that all comes from this half step and whole step between the third and the fourth, and the fourth to the fifth, right? So that's where we get the raised fourth from. Again, most of this is just review, but what I do want to pay attention to is that we're looking at G Ionian compared to C Lydian. And I very specifically am comparing these two together because they are so similar, and it just gives me a real good conversation to have around pointing out some of the things to be on the lookout for when you start writing music. But with that being said, I do want to clarify it a little bit because I think that, there were some folks that weren't 100% certain what I was coming across with in the original Lydian video. So here, if we look at the top of the circle of fifths, we're looking at the C major chord, right? We're looking at the C major key. C major, G major, F minor, D minor, A minor, E minor. C major, G major, F major, D minor, A minor, E minor, B diminished. Sorry about that. So we're looking at C major here as the key. Now, you'll notice that I'm comparing G major to C Lydian. Now, if we look at the circle of fifths, we'll see that C major is extremely close to C major, right? Just going from C major to G major it's just the next iteration. It's a perfect fifth, but it's just the next iteration in the circle of fifths. So if we kind of carry that out a little bit, we'll start to see where the D major, the B minor, and the F sharp diminished from Lydian kind of fit into G major, right? So here, when we look at them in the scale, we can see that all the chords are identical. They're in different locations, but they're still these same identical chords. Now, if we look at this and we look down at the kind of the blue part, that's where we'll see that we have the D major and the B minor. And if we look at the yellow part, that's where we kind of lose the F major and D minor, because F major and D minor were part of C, but now we're kind of moving into G. So we're going to kind of fade away and not worry about the F major and the D minor from this perspective anymore. And we're not going to really worry about B diminished, right? Because we've now moved into G. And here we know that G has an F sharp diminished, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove the B diminished just to make it a little bit more clear that what we're looking at. And so if we're looking at the right side, right, we have the C major, G major, D major, A minor, E minor, B minor, and F sharp diminished. Now the only difference between C major and G major is the B minor, the D major, and the F sharp diminished, right? We still have E minor, we still have A minor, we still have C major, we still have G major. So if we look at that on the right-hand side and we look at the difference, well, we'll see that D major, B minor, F sharp diminished. That's the only difference between G major and C major. And therefore, when we look at C Lydian looks identical to the G major key. Looks identical, with the exception that the chords are in different positions, right? That's all that's going on there, right? It's just simply different positions. So keep that in mind, but we see how they're pretty much identical from chords. Now let's say that we had a chord progression, and a chord progression just means how do you move the sound away from your tonic and how do you get back to it, right? So let's say that you're writing something in G Ionian, G major, and let's just say that you had a chord progression of a 1, 4, 5, right? That's a lot of majors, but whatever, right? So you're jamming on the G, then you move to a C, then a D, and then you come back to G, right? So if you're on a G, dun, 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 and then CD, dun dun, 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 right? So that's kind of going from G to C to D, and it comes back. Now, let's say that you have, a song that you're writing in C Lydian, and you're doing something kind of similar, but let's say you're doing a 1, 2, 5, right? So you're going C, D, G, right? So if you're on C, dun 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 dun, right? So you're kind of coming back to, you got that G for low, and then you come back to the C. However you're kind of working it, right? But even though we're pretty much playing the exact same chords, you can see that we have a different methodology of moving away from our tonic. In G, we move away from it by going to C and then to D, and then we come back to G. And in C Lydian, we have a methodology of moving from C to D to G back to C, right? So we have different, even though the same chords, we have a different methodology of moving away from our tonic and getting ourselves back to it. Now, what would happen if you wound up in that C to G, but instead you wound up spending too much time on that G? Well, what you're going to do is you're going to confuse the listener. They're not going to really be able to tell if they're in G major or C Lydian anymore, because it's so easy to get confused between these two because they're identical. They're the exact same for all intents and purposes. They're just, the sequence to them matters. And you can very quickly and very easily get lost if you're not paying attention to how these two can overlap each other very quickly and very easily. That overlapping, you may not even realize it as you may not even realize it as a songwriter, but your listeners will definitely pick up on it. So this is what I was saying, is you got to be careful, because you can very easily bleed over into something else that you weren't necessarily intending on, just simply because the way that you structured your music wounds up being favorable to something different than what you intended, right? So again, if I hung out on that G for a little bit too long, I kind of by default almost moved from C Lydian to G Ionian, just by making that mistake. So again, very, very easy to do, and it's noticeable if you're a listener. So just keep it in mind, right? This is what I was trying to get at in that last part of the original Lydian video. So anyways, with that being said, right, again, so some of the Lydian warnings, if you're not careful, right, you can easily wind up moving into a neighboring key very quickly, very easily. So again, you got to be careful. You got to pay attention to when you're writing a piece of music where you're hanging out on the chords, right? So again, you just got to be careful, because it will confuse your listener, and they'll be like, fine, it might be a decent sounding song, but it's kind of the difference between the one-hit wonders. They get lucky sometimes, and then there's others that constantly bang out hit after hit after hit, right? They're just paying attention to a lot of the modes and the keys and everything else. So it is the difference between really writing something that sounds different and unique versus somebody that is in a group that kind of all their songs start to sound the same, right? So again, you just got to be certain not to linger on certain chords that could bring you into a different key, right? You always need to pay attention to how you're bringing your listener back to the home, right? And let's say C Lydian, you need to know how you're bringing them back to that C major chord, right? So anyways, with all that being said, this was kind of the final bit that I think might have had a few people a little confused on the original one, but definitely something to, kind of pay attention to. So, again, I think the primary thing is just be careful about knowing where you can go wrong, right? We know for a fact from C Lydian to G major, we can go wrong very quickly in there. So if you're writing something, just know where you can go wrong, because then you know how to avoid it, or you know how to change keys if you want to leverage it. Either way, then there's nothing wrong with that. So anyways, with all that being said, like I mentioned, this is the final supplemental on Lydian. I think it's been a good series on this one. I think we've driven quite a few points home, and all this information is going to help you out with the other modes as well. So with all that being said, I really appreciate everybody taking time to check out these videos. I think this one, like I said, it's been a good one. So with all that being said, I would love to hear your comments down below. Let me know what you got out of the videos. Let me know if you have any questions. Really appreciate a thumbs up and a subscribe so I can keep bringing these videos to you. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and close out this one, and we will see you in the next video for Mix the Lydian. Take care, everybody.